Okay, you guys, welcome back, and we're so glad that you're here with us today. Today we're got a beautiful sunny day out here, and we're able to do this video. And the video we're doing today on peach tree pruning is the tools of peach tree pruning. And this has been a question that people have asked us a lot over the years, and of course we've even gotten some questions on our last videos about, well, hey, what pruner are you using, or what type of tools do I need? And so we want to go over that today and spend a little time talking about the different tools. And we want to kind of go in depth on different ones, but just generally we have the big pruners here, the long handled ones, and we have the short handled handheld pruners, and we have some saws here for cutting big limbs. And we also have some ladders back here. We'll show you how those kind of come into play at different points. So we will talk about all these things, and we'll try to use them a little bit too to show you how what's good about them and what's not so good about them. And so today we're up here at our house where we have about 10 trees in our yard. I thought this would be a good place to talk about the tools of peach tree pruning, because we have some unique circumstances where some of these tools come into play more than the trees at our farm that don't use as many tools because they're set up differently. And the ones here at our house, the trees are, I'll talk a little bit about that. So for example, this tree right behind me here, you can see that it's kind of got a tall trunk, and then it comes into a satellite dish up a big thing. And part of the reason we selected that tree from the nursery that was kind of pruned that way, where the branches were kind of up high, and that's not so normal, because normally we're trying to keep that main trunk about 2 feet from the ground. So to have that up almost 4 feet high is not as typical. But we chose that because this tree was going in our yard at our house, and we have some different special circumstances we have to consider. Number one is that we don't have as much room at our house. We have flower beds around and bushes and shrubs, and we have to get in here and mow the lawn and get under the trees. And we also have this cooler unit down here where it's kind of would be in the way, except the tree's up tall enough that it goes over it. So we can have this tree in our yard, but we have to go up higher with the tree. So we're doing the same pruning style, the open center satellite dish upside down umbrella style, as we do at the farm and with all our other trees. But the bowl that we're making is up 2 or 3 feet higher into the air than the standard trees that we would do at the farm. And of course, some benefits to that is the trees that we do at the farm are in mass, and there's a lot of them. So we try to keep them low to the ground so that everything can be done from the ground, so that we don't have to use a ladder. So that brings me to our first tools that we're going to go over. So here is some ladders I brought to show you today. And one of them is an orchard looking ladder that you may have seen at your grandpa's old barn, or you've seen at the special farming store or whatever. And this ladder is great for the orchards. I also have a standard step ladder right here that you might have in your garage or whatever. And one of the things about ladders is that you have to climb them and you have to move them around. And so they're used for a taller tree so you can reach up to it. Now again, like I had just said, most of the time on the commercial orchards, we're trying to keep from having to use ladders because they take longer to use and we have to move them every time we move. But if you can keep a tree close to the ground where everything you can do is within reach, and maybe with those long handled pruners right there on the table, they extend your reach by about 2 feet. So that's kind of one of the reasons they use those as well, and to keep everything within reach on the ground so that you can move around fast and do your job without having to move a ladder every other minute. But should you have to use a ladder, and for the trees at our house here, like I was just saying, we have to use a ladder because we're going up high, and this ladder here is really great for getting up high, and it's a tripod. And let me get the other ladder and I'll show you some things about the ladders, why the orchard ladder is good for going up high in the orchard versus maybe the step ladder is okay if that's all you have. And for many years, those are the type of things I have because we're not real rich farmers or anything. But whatever tools you have, you try to make them work. But if you can get the nice tools, then it does make a difference. It does speed up your ability to get it done quicker, and maybe you have a little more energy. Maybe you do a little bit better job because you have better tools. So that the tools are important to your job here, like anything else. So this ladder here is pretty good. It's not a bad ladder, but it is on 4 legs. And you know, right now it's on even ground, but if I take it over here and move it to this side of the tree, and now there's a molehill right there. Now the ladder, you can see I start tipping and all sorts of stuff. So that's kind of why these are not as great for going around uneven ground as you commonly find in an orchard or in a farm setting. You find holes and divots and mounds and all sorts of things. And so your ladders can get tippy. And I have to say, even falling off a 6-foot ladder can damage your body or hurt you. And it might hurt you just enough where it starts hurting your ability to run your farm. So you do have to consider these things that, hey, if that increases my risk of potentially falling when I'm tired pruning an orchard, then maybe I'd better go the orchard ladder. Now the orchard ladder is a tripod, so you might think, well, hey, that's not as stable. It only has 3 legs and that one has 4. But this one has special feet that have these they have some things where they're able to dig into the ground. And so you can actually press them into the ground right here with these feet into the uneven ground, and now that makes that really stable. And then this thing out here gives you that stability over here, and it's really good for the uneven ground because you don't have that 4-sided square trying to balance. The tripod can pretty much keep you balanced on any levelness of ground. So that's one of the beautiful benefits of this thing, is that it can traverse the uneven ground. The other really good thing about this skinny pole is that it can maneuver into the crooks and crannies of the tree really well, better than this thing can. Let's take a tree that's low over here and I'll show you. So let's say I'm trying to get in here on this tree and the front of the ladder is hitting some of the lower branches and things, and so I can't quite get where I wanted to get. Maybe I wanted to get closer in there, but this ladder here allows me to do that. I can just tuck that pole behind there, and now I can get a lot closer in here, way in here, compared to where the other ladder would have held me out here. And so this ladder makes it so that it's a lot easier to get into the nooks and crannies. You have a lot better stability. And I have to say, because it's just a aluminum pole on the back, this ladder is really light and handy. And so it doesn't tire you out after using it all day. So this is an 8-foot ladder. And it's very handy for our yard because a lot of our trees in our yard are going up into 10, 12, 14 feet high. And that's quite a bit higher than the trees at our farm that are maybe only 8 to 10 feet tall. Okay, you guys, since we're on kind of the topic of height and using ladders and trees that are taller, I want to talk about the long-handled pruners. And we have 3 of them here for you. And this one I'll talk about first, since you're thinking to yourself maybe, hey, this is not really peach pre-trimming, right? Well, that's right. This one maybe is more for your hedges and your different things. But I know that a lot of homeowners, this is what they have. And I know that, you know, in times past when we've been more poor and we haven't had very many things, that, you know, something like this, even though it's not the optimal tool, you know, if I come over here it's still going to cut my branch for me. So whatever you got to do, these will work. They're not going to make you the fastest, but if you only have one tree in your yard, they certainly will get the job done. But if you have more trees and you're trying to speed it up a little bit and get more efficient, then, and you have to deal with some height, then you may want some pruners like this. Now these pruners are very lightweight. I know they look really big and everything, but they're quite lightweight compared to this one right next to it. These ones are really heavy, but it has a really big knuckle on there for extra torque when you're pruning, and it can cut a huge limb. But this one here, I'll talk about first more. It is really lightweight, and it is basically just a standard pruning size on the actual head up here. It's not that it's trying to cut such a big limb. It's cutting small limbs too, but it's just really lightweight, and more what they're trying to give you here is just some length for your pruner. So again, it's a lot almost the same size as a hand pruner. It's mostly, this one is just built to be really lightweight so it doesn't tire your arms out when you're going up there to cut the stuff way up high. So this is really good to have if you got to deal with some height on your trees and you want to stay on the ground and try to do it from there, then it's nice to have a lightweight option where you can reach up and do that if you don't want to use the ladders as much. So this pruner, I'll just show you an example before we move on to the big one there. This really is meant for taking off these smaller branches and just giving you some length and leverage to do it, because you don't want to be taking off too big of branches with this type of thing, because you can try, but these handles right here, they're just made of fiberglass. They're hollow. They're not very strong, and if you try to take off something real big and try to crunch it off, you might just break the handles off, and it's not really meant for that. This big one here now, this big one is meant for that, and it has metal steel running all the way through the handles. It's meant for grabbing onto something big and crushing its way through it. So let's go take one off that's big, and I'll show you. Here's a big one right here, and we're just gonna take that one right off. And here's another big one. Just took it right off. So try not to get your finger in there, you guys, otherwise you'll take your finger off too. But this one gives you that leverage that you need to crunch those off there real fast. Okay, so now that we're talking about taking big limbs off quickly with those big pruners, I thought that would be a good time to talk about the saws now, because that's kind of what they're there for, is to take off those big limbs that your pruners and your leverages and your strength of your hand can't quite cut very efficiently, but these saws go through them really fast. So this saw right here, I have to say, is one of my very favorites, because it's really lightweight, it's small enough, it's real handy to have on you, and it does the job beautifully on just about anything. And this one is just a little bit bigger one, and it does a really good job too. And then of course, if I really trying to get efficient out there and I'm worn out, I just get the old Sawzall here and I use the reciprocating blade, and it just cuts through it like butter. And on that one, you may want to bring an extra battery with you for the day if you're going to be out at the orchard, so that you have lots of juice. And they have lots of different blades for cutting, like the green fresh wood, like these trees where they're live trees. And so this is just one of them, but they have a lot of different ones, and it even says wood pruning on it. You know, they have different blades like that. And the one that's in it right now, I think it just is a standard wood blade, but it do the trick too. And I want to do a few examples of that right over here on this tree. So I'll do one with this, and I'll show you how quick that goes. And maybe I'll do one with this too and show you kind of how quick that goes. And you can decide, say, hey, which one you think is better. So let's come over here. On this tree, I've already kind of looked at it, and I've decided that this limb coming out this way is kind of getting shaded out by the limbs above it. So I think it's time for this one to go and let the tree put its energy somewhere else. So I'm going to cut this one with my hand blade first, and we'll see how fast that goes through it. and I'm going to come right up to where the tree can heal over it fairly quickly. I don't want to cut it up here because then the tree has to try to heal over that big stub. Let's go right about here where the skin of the tree can close it up pretty quick. Okay, right there. And there you go. In about 5 seconds there, we got the whole limb off, and it's a pretty big chunk there. All right, so let's try this other big one now. Okay, now here's a sample that we're going to use the power saw on. And this one is kind of a funny position where it has this big growth out here, and I can't even get the saw in here to cut it anyway. So I'd have to come from underneath. But it's kind of an awkward position to be sawing from with much power upside down like that. Well, this is a really good example of where something like the saw comes in really handy, where I can just hold it where it's supposed to go and pull the trigger. And it took it right off. So this is very handy to have, especially when you're trying to go to town in a bigger orchard and you're trying to get stuff done quickly. But certainly if this is all you have, this is going to do the trick too, and it'll do it pretty quick too. I mean, like I said, these teeth are just sharp as razors, and they're going to go through anything. Okay, you guys, so this brings us to kind of the last tools that I wanted to show you today. And these are the hand pruners. These are the ones that are going to do most of your work for you on the pruning of the tree. And they can do just about everything. They just can't handle the big logs, but they do everything else. And so the brand that I really like, and let me just say the brand, is Corona. And they have proven time and time again, because I've used many different brands over the years trying to decide what I like. And I just always keep coming back to the Corona pruners. And they're just built really well, and they're good steel. And so that brings me to the next thing. One of the things you want on your pruners is to keep them sharp. And especially on these hand ones, because they're doing all the finesse work. And if your pruners are dull and loose and not working good, a lot of times you can actually do more damage to the limbs you're pruning, because when you prune them, you want a nice clean cut so the tree can heal fast. But if you're getting rough cuts that are having strings of the bark hanging off and all sorts of things, the tree has a harder time dealing with those to heal. Just like as if me and you had a hangnail after cutting our nails. It's hard for us to deal with a hangnail just bothering us all the time. We would want to cut that off. So the clean cuts means a lot to the tree too. And so if you'll join me here, we'll look at this, how to sharpen one, and the things to look for. So this particular model right here, it kind of has a curved blade, is my very, very favorite over all the years I've done this. And it's just quick on the draw, quick to be in my pocket, quick for everything. And it's almost as if it becomes part of my hand. I really like the feel of that one, and the way they have it so that it's a quick for the blade to close and open. But we have some other ones here too that are definitely widely used. They've been using these for I don't know, since forever. And this is like a standard thing, and it works really good too. And Corona builds this too, and it's all metal stuff. And I have to say something about the all metal, that I bought a lot of the pruners over the years, and they'll have plastic handles, and maybe they'll have a plastic thing in here, rubber thing in there. And after using it on hundreds of trees, those break within the first year. They start breaking down. So I really appreciate that Corona takes the time to make sure everything's made of metal. So another thing about these pruners, this particular model that I really like compared to even the other models of Corona or the other companies out there that make them, is that this pruner opens up really wide. Whereas these pruners, you'll notice, they only open up this wide. And for me, that makes a big difference, because for me, I have big, powerful hands, and I'm able to make use of a big opening like this. I can get a hold of limbs that are bigger, and I can go right through them. Whereas maybe some people are going to have to go to the long-handled pruners to do that same thing. So this can be good for a lot of people, but just understand that with a pruner that's set up like this, you're going to be a lot more efficient if you get good at using it for the big limbs too, than something like this that is not going to be able to get the bigger limbs. Now these are the pruners that you see me using on almost all of my peach tree videos, and there's three things that you kind of need to keep an eye on as you're using these, because this is your tool that's keeping you going. And the three things are lubrication, adjustment of the nut here, and also sharpness with a file. And so I want to go through all three things right now, and I'll do those to my thing. And we'll do the sharpening first, and I'll just sharpen it that way a few times. Then I'll come straight and push that metal back the other way, and then I'll come do that a few more times, and then I'll push the metal back the other way, and a few more times, and push the metal back the other way. And pretty soon you get a very razor sharp edge on there, and it makes really fine cuts, and it makes your hand have to work less hard too, because it cuts through everything really easy. So this is all about speeding you up and saving your energy too, to have a good pruner all ready to go. Okay, so that's the file. It's nice to have your file on hand with you at the orchard and keep you going. And maybe, you know, something small like this and the crescent wrench, you know, you can keep them in your back pocket so that as you're zooming around the trees, you can just keep your sharpness going and keep your adjustment going. The other thing they have here is that we adjust is the nut. And this nut is supposed to never move, because that's why it has the special nylon grip nut there. But inevitably, after thousands of prunings, and it does move a little bit, and it'll loosen off, and so you got to retighten it every now and then. Now if you tighten it too tight like that, your pruners are stiff now, they won't move, so you don't want that. On the other side, if I loosened it off too much, it would be really loosey-goosey, which is easy for your hand. But if it's too loose, you can see the blade is starting to wiggle around, and that makes it so that your cuts they don't cut through the wood, they kind of just bend over it. So you don't want it like that either, because then it doesn't give you a good clean cut. So you want it just right. And the just right spot is where it feels like it could be tight kind of there, but it still is moving pretty good for you. So that's that. Now, along with the tightness there, after you do, you know, hundreds of trees, and dirt and grime and bark and sap and all sorts of stuff gets into the joint there, to help keep that fluidity of movement too, you want to just spray a little bit of WD-40 down into there. And it don't take much. You don't need to soak your whole hand in WD-40, but just enough to get into the joint and keep things moving really good and smooth, so you can keep your hand from getting too tired out. And so those are the three things that you probably want to have with you as you're pruning with your hand pruners, and the other pruners too. You sharpen them too, and you can keep them lubricated too. Okay, you guys, I hope you enjoyed us going through the tools, and I have one more thing to tell you on tools, and that is that if you needed the bare minimum tools, and often that's what I try to take with me when I'm going to the orchard. I don't take a whole host of tools with me. Normally, based on what I think I'm going to be doing that day, I'll just take the necessary tools. So if I was to take a tool, I think I'd just take this saw with me, and this pruner, and maybe my tools to keep that pruner going all day. And those are the tools that I would take as my bare minimum setup to effectively prune the peach trees. So thank you guys for joining us on another peach pruning video, and we glad that we could share this with you, and glad that you're with us. And we will see you next time, and have a great day, you guys.